Okay, here is the second of the attempted description of how I built my saw stand. Again, I covered all these diagrams a little bit in the last video, but basically this is the side diagram. Here are the bolts, and I believe that's visible for the bolts. And you can pause this or the other video if you want to look back. So we have the two side pieces, we have the front piece, the two levers, again 2x4 or 2x6, the two hinge boards that would use for the wheels, and then the number 5 is the front piece where the pipe goes through. 6 is a piece of hardwood that goes across the entire center line to hold the back of the pipe, and 7 is the front, 7 is the piece of board that goes on top that the ropes are connected to that pulls down. So what I tried to do was, I probably should have explained this in the other video, but maybe I'll do this one first, I'm not sure. So this will be one of the two videos. So I've tried to label these with letters for which bolts were used, and I tried to number them for where the boards go. So for the side pieces, you can see an A near the hole that would go through the frame. D would be either the lag screws or lag bolts of some sort. It's around 3.5 inches from the end of the 2x4 is where the hinge starts, and then these are 3.5-inch hinges, and then again on that side. And so this would be more of a top-down view if you folded the side 2x4 out flat. This is how it would work. And so what I would recommend is setting up, after you cut the pieces, set it up like this, and with the hinges, there's the barrel of the hinge. That's the spacing you want. So the hinge barrel, if I remember, well, I know the hinge barrel is right off the edge of the 2x6 wheel piece, and if I remember correctly, yes. No, I remembered incorrectly. So the hinge is actually up slightly from the bottom. So that means the barrel of the hinge is on the side of the 2x4. So again, I had listed in the diagram the distance between, for this centerpiece of where it attaches. You just center that against the sideboard when it's all laid out, and that's where you would attach it there. Does it matter? No. You could move it back and forth either direction. The benefit of having the hinges out to the side as far as you can is that means that the weight that's on the wheels, which again is out as far as you can get them, goes more directly from the wheel to the hinge to the sideboard. If you have it in further, there's just more torque and more sideways twist because of where the attachment point is. It really doesn't matter a whole lot as long as you have enough space to attach the hinge to both pieces. You're probably good. To attach the wheels to both pieces, you're probably good. Or wheels to the bottom. The other piece that's important is because there's a lot of stress on this board, I would recommend a piece of solid hardwood, not something soft, because it will end up pulling through a soft board. And you really don't want that when you have your saw up or something heavy. And similarly with the piece on the bottom that holds the pipe on the back side, you could also, if you had something long enough and you attached another 2x4 across the back, you could run another 2x6 down along the front and just have the pipe go through the front 2x6 through the back 2x6 and then terminate there. You could also, let's see if I can get in here. Another good recommendation, so that the pipe does not move in and out too much, drill down, put the pipe in through the 2x4, get it in the right position, mark a hole or mark a spot, take the pipe back out, drill down through, and then have like a washer or piece of metal on the inside, and then a bolt that goes down through. So the bolt or pin would run along that washer and keep the pipe from moving back and forth. That would reduce the amount of forward and back motion, because you really only need this pipe to come out enough to be able to rotate. So there's that. The other piece, the placement of these holes for the position of the pin, that varies. In this case, due to the distance I have, because as I explained in the other video as well, because of the vertical distance, this needs to go up and down to either engage or disengage the wheels. And again, depending on where they are in their rotation, you'll either have them back further and you have to have the tilt go much higher to disengage the wheels, or if they're out towards the center of the saw, you don't have to go quite as high. You have to get that full distance, vertical distance, around whatever circumference you use on the center section, and then that will directly apply to how much distance you have to rotate this to go that amount of travel. On my carving bench video, you'll notice that the way I set that up, disengaged, meaning the unit is completely down on its solid boards or wheels, or no, on the frame. That one doesn't have wheels. That just has 2x6 frame that it sits on. So when that's completely disengaged and the frame is down solid, the bar is off to the right, flat. Then I rotate 180 degrees and it comes the whole way over to this side when the wheels are fully engaged. And then again it latches. So for that distance, I had to set up the centerpiece such that the circumference matched the vertical distance of travel needed, and the total circumference travel was required was the full 180 degree turn. On this unit, because I have a wider center section that goes from right here where it's mostly disengaged. Again, when I finally get it to the right place where I'm going to actually use the saw, I'm going to actually tune the level of the feet to make sure that they are the correct height. Right now they're just at some random height. Oh, another thing before I forget, the benefit of using 2x4s on this sides versus 2x6s, which go down further, is you can actually get in there with the wrenches that they recommend on the Sawstop instructions to adjust the feet. That's important because initially I thought I was going to use custom feet, but then I decided, hey, wait a second, if I just use 2x4s here, I can just use the regular feet on the saw, and that was less work. So that's a benefit of using 2x4 size for these sideboards and front boards, is you can still get in there. It's a little more of a pain because you have some stuff in the way, but you can still get in there to adjust the actual proper feet. Yeah, so again, the placement of these pinholes, initially I had it such that when it rested down, the pipe was on top of here. Then I realized later that, hey, wait a second, due to me having to readjust that center section because basically I did not have this adjusted properly such that it was actually holding the rope. On the bottom side of this, and you can see there's that little groove. That was a piece of bowling alley maple floor, or a piece of maple that was in a bowling alley floor. That groove was a glue line. Initially I had that on top. The rope was slipping in the groove and the metal plate was not holding it down. So I had to take that all off, flip it over, run the rope up through the pair of holes, over a 1/4 inch, down through the pair of holes, and then that friction for that up, over, down with that metal plate is enough to hold that solid. Again, you could use a piece of wood screwed down on top. Basically, you just need something that holds down that whatever tensioning material you use, rope or wire rope or something like that, nylon rope, something. You just need to have it so it doesn't slip on either end. But because I had adjusted that and moved that all around, the distance, vertical distance changed, which means that now the fully down position, this pipe has to go down further. The benefit of having a piece of metal here is I was able to just bend the corner, and now it rests on that little end when it's down. So to pull it out, again, this is going to be impossible to do with one hand. It goes clear to right there, and then the wheels are fully mobile on all four wheels. So then that's how I figured out where to drill that hole for the pin. So yeah, the pin placement is probably one of the last things I would do, because you figure out where on the bottom, and I don't recommend just dropping it like that, but it's, that's the way it goes. The pin placement is the last thing because that's one of the easiest to adjust. If you decide to have a little something on this bottom area as your stop point, like if you want to attach it, I would attach that before putting this front piece on, because it's very hard to get up underneath to attach something otherwise. With the carving bench it was easier because I hadn't had everything attached yet when I did that part. Let's see what else. Oh, I used blue, these are just water pipe, half-inch inner diameter water pipe, galvanized water pipe with an elbow. So this ends up being one full 2-foot section, more or less, cut. I would recommend a 12-inch section on the front to make it much easier to do attachments and rotations around. Again, you can figure that out. If you use a 12-inch section that is not cut, you will have threads on the ends of each, most likely, or possibly. At least at Home Depot here in California, they sell water pipes that are in like 2-foot sections, 1-foot sections. They do 8-inch sections. They do all sorts of different sizes. If they have the threads on, you can purchase the end caps and you screw that on. I didn't. This was a cut section, so I just put one of the pieces of plastic. I carefully removed the piece of plastic that was on the threads originally and just stuck it on the end so there's no sharp bits, and that will keep dust out of it. The other side's horizontal and doesn't really matter. If I had a longer pipe, I probably would have just screwed the end cap on, and that would have helped hold it in to keep it from moving back and forth, but I did not have that because I don't have threads on that end either. Again, this was an extra piece of pipe that I had from when I did the carving bench. So the one thing with the pipe, if you're going to use pipe like this, there's blue Loctite and red Loctite, meaning a compound that you put in pipe threads to keep them from coming loose. Blue Loctite is only pressure releasing. Red Loctite, you need fire to release it, meaning a torch. I don't recommend red, but I did put blue around both of these connections prior to attaching that elbow. I put it in my vise and used a pipe wrench to really crank it solidly attached, and then I used a file to clean off the grooves that the pipe wrench made in the pipe. You definitely want to do that before setting all this up. Again, you don't want to have to take all this back apart to try and retighten that. And the other thing is, you want that joint 100% locked in so you know the exact angle of where this is as compared to all your any bolt holes and other attachments you do. I did not do that with the carving bench, and it almost messed me up because then I had everything attached and then realized, hey, why is that slipping? It's like, oh no, the threads are moving. So I had to actually get an entire revolution to tighten it to the appropriate place so that the bar was off to the side like I wanted it. I recommend getting that joint completely solid and locked in so it's not going to move before doing any of this setup, because if you don't and you originally plan for having the pipe off to the side and a full rotation, and to get the threads tight you have to somehow have the pipe, say, straight down, that's not going to work, or straight up, that's not going to work, and then you're going to have to either adjust your diameter to change the circumference so you get the correct travel, or you're just going to have to crank it way past and hope you can get it to the right place. Also, due to the amount of stress that you have to put on this pipe to tighten it fully, to get it fully cranked in, you don't want to do that with the wood. You want to have that in a solid metal vise. Again, I know that because I didn't have that on the carving vise, and the wood was making all sorts of nasty cracking and popping noises, so that's not recommended. Let's see what else. I also, if you're using wood for this center section, use a hardwood. Don't use a softwood for any of that spacing material. The reason I say that is a very much high amount of torque and pressure when you're cranking down on that rope. And as I said in my first video, that just shredded pieces of pine. I also recommend 1/4-inch bolts or the equivalent metric bolts, and like these 1/4-inch, because the benefit of this smooth shaft is that way it won't shred the rope at all if you loop it around, but also it's thick enough that that pressure is not going to cause it to bend or break as it did with the small bolts that I initially tried, that I talked about in my initial video. Let's see what else. I have the other video which is going to cover a lot of this, but yeah, I think that's everything that I didn't cover in the other video. Again, the big piece of adjustment on this is the length of the rope and the size of the diameter that this rotates and pulls with. So you don't want, oh, I know another thing. You want to have a nice, solid, smooth surface at this interface. You don't want to have anything that this board and this board are going to catch on, because that will cause friction and wear out the board. On my carving bench, I actually put a piece of aluminum underneath this plate, such that it was the aluminum rubbing against the wood instead of wood on wood. Wood on wood, especially if you're adjusting it a lot, will wear out and wear through and cause, it'll cause the distances to change as it wears. So I'm hoping that because this top piece is maple and smooth maple, that's going to wear decently well for all the more I move the saw around on these 2x6s. I may have to eventually either put a piece of sheet metal with no sharp edges around that, such that it wears a little better. You could try that. You could try a bunch of things, but you don't want any rope pieces to catch on any of the wood and wear the rope, because again, that'll cause the rope to fail. So I would recommend a gap. I mentioned this in the other video, but I recommend, however you want the rope coming down, that it be vertical on from where it's pulling down to the side of the where it pulls from the center, meaning you can see that kind of, well, I'm assuming you can see that it pulls straight down, so the rope is not catching on the 2x4, so you definitely want that gap in there. What else? I think that's the important piece. So let's see, we'll go back to the diagram here real quick. So the first pieces I would cut are the sides. The second pieces I would cut would be the 2x6 sections. The third piece would be these levers. And again, I would measure, dry fit, and screw and make sure all that attaches correctly. Then, leaving the hinges attached to this board, attach the side pieces, and then attach the hinges, put the wheel piece and such inside the saw, attach the hinges to the 2x4s. That'll also, let's see, here we go, wheel diagram. So with the hinges, the wheels that we have here have a longer distance, like a rectangle, for the attachment point. I use that long distance along the 2x6 versus going the other direction. You can does that matter? No. You could change that however you want. Again, just depending on where you have the wheel placement is going to determine how steep of an angle that 2x6 has to go for the wheel to be fully disengaged, depending on where it is in its rotation. And I wanted to have a wheel around, but I don't think I have any out, and I'd be digging around. Well, let me see if I can find one. I found one. So this is not what I used, because you don't necessarily want something that has a brake that could engage where you can't get it. But if you ignore this brake, this would be the wheel placement on, like if this is the 2x6 and the hinge is right here, that's how this diagram is. So if this is where that is and this is the 2x6, there would be a 5/8 inch here between the edge of the 2x6 and the wheel attachment point, and then it's 1.5 inches this direction. And then you can see the other thing you have to make sure, depending on your size of the wheels, you don't want to attach the wheel, like say this is the sideboard, you don't want to attach the wheel and then realize, oh, I can't rotate that the whole way. So you need to make sure that wherever you attach the wheels, it is far enough to do its complete rotation and not run into the side. That's very important. You will learn the hard way, like I did on 2 projects ago with wheels, that, oh, I have to move all those. And then I ended up making the board, because I tried to use just a single piece of 3.5 inch or 3/4 inch plywood for my 2 projects ago, the dual flip table. And I had to drill so many different holes, it's almost like Swiss cheese. It still works, but I really should go in and replace that with a solid piece, because 3/4 inch plywood does great, but not with too many holes. So make sure whatever size wheel you use, it will rotate the entire way around without impacting the side of the setup. And again, depending on if it's facing in this orientation, the bottom piece is going to have to tilt much steeper to get this to disengage than it would if it's in this orientation. So don't just test it in this orientation, test it where the wheels are actually back as far as they'll go, and then that'll have to, again, have a much steeper angle. And again, that just means you're going to have a longer rope to do the attachment. But that should work for there. I think, again, other than not knowing what people are going to use for materials, that's a lot of the logic and reasoning and why I did the various pieces and choices that I did. So hopefully that'll make sense to some extent. I realize that, yes, this is a crazy diagram, but it works for me. Hopefully it'll work for other people, but it works for me. So yeah, this is the diagram for the side pieces and the levers. This is the diagram for the front. So you can see here the attachment points, the location of the wheel. And again, this is as if it was laid flat. It normally is attached vertically. So you do the hole for the pipe that comes through. Here you can see that there are the 4 holes where the 2 sides of the rope come up through that very top board, over and then down. And then you just have something on top of that rope, screwed down piece of wood, metal, something that doesn't allow the rope to slide back down through. Here would be the pipe hanger to hold the longer pipe, and notice I drew a proper longer pipe because I recommend a longer pipe than what I did, which ended right there, because that'll work much easier. With these vertical bolts, you really just need to make sure that depending on the angle of the sideboards, the bolts will still go straight down, and so you need a wider hole at the bottom side of the board on the side pieces, such that when the piece is completely tilted up, the bolt will still go down through and attach here. Could you use something else? Yeah, probably, but again, with a longer pipe, it's not as big a deal, because this can just float around, or for that matter, for a longer pipe, as long as this, when you tweak it, holds on. I still would recommend bolts of some sort to hold it there, though. That way it just stays in place, and things that stay in place where they're supposed to be tend to wear less. But yeah, so there's the front pipe area again. The screws that I'm talking about for the hole, you can see there. one to each side of the pipe hole. That tends to hold the 2x4 together to resist splitting. What else? I think that's everything. Between the two videos, I'm really hoping that covers all the important pieces. Oh, the other piece, I guess the one last thing is, and I don't know if I can show this without going. Yes. So I have Rockler as the quick connect 4-inch ports. And due to this, since I did not purchase the dust collection attachment panel, I have to have a way to connect my dust collector to this unit. So that has the Rockler quick connect attachments. So I put one of the 4-inch ones with the rubber side on here and have the dust port right there. Eventually I might get a hose and then make a side piece such that it comes down to a piece that attaches down further. But for now, that should work. But you need to make sure whatever you attach here for the boards does not go up too high that you can't connect your dust collection. So again, the other thing to keep in mind is I would recommend attaching these levers before you attach the 2x6 to the side pieces, because you can't get, well, I couldn't get my screwdrivers and such down in there to attach that. For the other important piece, I recommend washers on the inside between the metal and the bolt head, and everywhere that the washer and nut would contact the wood. So there's even washers on the inside of the hinges so that it didn't dig into the hinges quite as much. But everywhere, like here, there's a washer on the outside, and I have the bolt going in with the end of the bolt, which you can't really see, on the inside. And then the nut is on the inside with a washer. So here you can see the nut is on the outside. But I wanted it to not stick out quite as far in the front, so I ran the bolts in. On the sides, I have the bolts coming out, because that didn't matter quite so much. But yeah, that I hope that's everything. If anybody still has additional questions, let me know, and I'll try and do an additional description or write-up. But I'm hoping that covers all the pieces that somebody would need to make something like this. Like I said, I'm happy with it. It's not perfect, but it works. It does what I need. And with this pipe, you know, I can change how it adjusts. I can, you know, bend this piece around. This, I believe, is, I think that's 5/16. It's either 5/16 or 3/8. Let's see. Yeah, that's 5/16. So yeah, this is just a piece of 5/16 straight rod that I cut with a hacksaw, filed it off smooth, and then just bent in my vise to get the right angle for connecting. You could use something else, but again, the benefit of that is because I was able to bend it, and that actually, this does not push down much, but that holds it. So again, a lot of this thing is up to you, but I'm hoping that was useful. Thanks. Let me know if you have any questions.